We're going to learn. We want to get some of the background. We're going to learn a Sicha now for Purim, which is coming up, just a couple of weeks away from Purim. This is a fairly famous Sicha that made waves when the Rebbe said it, and so it's fairly famous. You may have learned it before. We're going to learn it again now. This is a Sicha the Rebbe said in 1984, after Purim of 1984. And it was subsequently edited by the Rebbe in two different versions. So we're going to learn the version that appears in the back of volume 27 of Likutei Sichos. So just a little background, and then we'll get into the Sicha. So the Shabbos after Purim in 1984, Shabbos Shmini Purim 1984. 1984 was a Iber year, was a leap year, and it was a leap year, and so the Shabbos after Purim was Shabbos Parsha Shmini. That Shabbos, the Rebbe said that there is a topic, since we're coming out, it's following Purim, it's a topic that's Purim related, and since we're the Shabbos after Purim, we'll talk about it now, though we should have spoken about it on Purim, but for various reasons, the Rebbe didn't talk about it then. And the Rebbe then went on to address, over the next 2 weeks, the two next Farbrengens, Shabbos Parsha Shmini and Shabbos Parsha Tazria, a very puzzling passage in the Gemara, a famous passage in the Gemara on Purim that's the subject of this Sicha. So we're going to get into that in a moment. The Rebbe explains the Gemara of after the statement of Chayiv Inish L'Psumei B'Puria Adela Yada. The Gemara says, Rava says, we're going to learn inside the Sicha. Rava says that there's an obligation on Purim to get drunk to the point that you don't know the difference between blessed as Mordechai and cursed as Haman. Between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. According to one opinion, we actually just fulfilled the obligation. But the interpretation is that you mix it up. You say first blessed is Mordechai, then cursed is Haman. Anyway, and then after that, the Gemara brings a story about Rabba and Abzera, who had who celebrated Purim together and had the festive meal together. That's the subject. That story, which is very puzzling, is the subject of this Sicha. 2 years later, in 1986, they prepared the Sicha for publication. Lahak, Rabbi Feldman, prepared it for the Rebbe to edit, for it to be published in Hamar, which was a periodical that came out, a scholarly journal, and the Rebbe's Sichos would appear in that. So they prepared it for that journal in 1986, and it was then printed. That's the version that we're actually going to study now. Later, 2 years later, in 1988, which is 30 years ago, they prepared it as a likut to be included in the series of Likutei Sichos, where they modified it and adapted it a little bit more. Some of the topics that are explored in the Sicha here are relegated to footnotes in the likut. Some topics are not. Some of the ideas, some of the points are not mentioned at all there. It's basically the same. There's one addition there which we'll maybe touch on, but I feel that we should study it from this one. This is a little bit closer to the way the Rebbe said it. There's a lot more color, so we're going to study this one. So the Sicha, as it appears in Likutei Sichos as a likut, you can find in volume 31 of Likutei Sichos, the second Sicha for Purim. And the Sicha we're learning, you can find either in the Hisvadius of Tafshin Mem Vav, so the 1986 series of Farbrengens is printed in the back, or in the back of Likutei Sichos Chelik Chav Zayin, volume 27. It's there in the back as well. So that's where this is from the Likutei Sichos volume 27. That's where our copies are from. So that's where we can follow along. What's interesting is that this topic, I mentioned the Rebbe spoke about it in 1984. This topic was something that the Rebbe had discussed with his father 50 years earlier. There's a letter that the Rebbe's father writes to the Rebbe. The Rebbe was in Paris then. It was 1934, and he writes to the Rebbe that he had received his explanation of this Gemara, and it is really wonderful. He compliments it, and then he goes on to explain it according to Kabbalah. So he gives a very mystical, Kabbalistic interpretation of this story in Gemara, where he talks about Rabba and Abzera and what they represented. It's a lengthy explanation in a letter that he writes to the Rebbe. So this was in 1934. So in 1984, exactly 50 years later, the Rebbe addresses it publicly. And the Rebbe actually, before he starts talking about it, he says, we're going to talk about it because his father mentions it. Interesting, in this letter, the Rebbe's father writes that we actually discussed this in the past. And I also have some glosses. I made some notes about it on the Medrash, on Megillas Esther. And you might have seen, you probably saw it there. He says he probably saw it in my medrash. You probably read my notes there on the margins of my medrash Rabbah on Megillas Esther. Okay, so the Gemara says, the Gemara Masechta Megillah says, Rava says, Amar Rava, Mechayiv inish l'bsuma b'puria adala yada. A person is obligated to be besuma, which Rashi says, what does besuma mean? L'ishtaker b'yayin, to be drunk on wine, on Purim, adala yada, till he doesn't know the difference between Arur Haman l'Baruch Mordechai, the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Then the Gemara continues and says like this: Rabba v'Rabzeira avdu sudas Purim b'hadei adadi. That'll be significant later. So Kam Rabba shachta l'Rabzeira. Rabba got up and he shachted. He seemed to have slaughtered Rabzeira. L'macher boy rachmi v'achye. The following day, the next day, Rabba prayed for Rabzeira and he revived him. He brought him back to life. L'shana, the following year, Amar Le, Rabba says to Rabzeira, Nesimar, let the master come, V'navid to this Purim b'hadei adadi, and let's celebrate Purim again. Let's have a festive meal again, like last year. Amar Le, so Rabzeira responds to Rabba and says, Le b'chol shaita v'shaita misrachish nisa. Not every single time do miracles happen. That's the story in the Gemara. So v'hinei, obviously there's a lot of commentary on this Gemara, and we're gonna touch on some of it here in the Sicha. Okay. So v'hinei sipur zet tamua b'yoseh. This story is extremely puzzling. First of all, how is it possible that Rabba should slaughter Rabzeira? Because he's drunk, therefore he's able to. Not everybody that gets drunk goes and starts committing an act of murder, God forbid. What is this that he got drunk and he slaughters him? But so, first of all, how could such a thing happen altogether? But to me, this is actually a very big question. The question's enhanced. When we consider the way the story unfolds, this becomes even more puzzling. Number one, Aleph l'machar b'irachme v'achye. The story continues that the following day he prays for him and he revives him, resurrects him really. Why is it that only the following day is it that Rabba realized he has to pray for Rabzeira to revive him? When it would seem that when he saw what happened to Rabzeira, he said, take it from Yad Lach, he should have done it immediately. It was only the following year, the following day, the Gemara says that he did it. So, the idea of that he was so drunk, you could say he was so drunk, he could wait until he didn't notice till the next day. In fact, that's what some of the commentaries suggest. But the truth is that we know that yayin kasha pachad mefigay, that somebody who's very drunk, so you snap out of it. You're seized with great fear. So you snap out of it. There's the story with the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek was once had a lot to drink, and he was ready to say Chassidus. So he passed his hand over his forehead, and he sobered up. So how did he do that? So he said he thought about the Eibush there, thought about God and God's presence, and he was seized with fear, and that sobered him up because it says Yain Kasha, strong wine, Pachad Mefigay, fear sobers it, fear numbs it. Although there's also a statement in the Gemara that pachad kasha yain mefigay. Somebody who's very afraid, so in order to lessen the fear, you drink a little bit, and that takes away some of the fear. So the Rebbe explains that there's different levels, different types of fear, and different types of drunkenness, and so they'll even out. But the point is that if something so devastating, something so harsh that happens, that should have sobered him up. He should have realized right away. What is he so drunk that even that event he was so unaware that he didn't realize till the next morning. Number two, L'shana Amar Le'neisei Mar V'navid Sudas Purim B'adei Adadi. The story continues that he says the following year, Rabba says to Rabzeira, come, he invites him again for Purim. So Hayitachin, how is it possible? After Rabba already is aware of and remembers what happened the previous year, so he doesn't hesitate for a moment, and he goes to invite Reb Zeira again to another Purim meal. So they should have another celebrate Purim as fun as it was the year before, like the previous year. So how is that possible that he did something like that? Maybe wait. The following year, let's do it all over again. Also, we don't find anywhere that Rabba should do tshuva, should repent for what he did. Not only does he not repent, not only is he not remorseful, he doesn't regret what he did, but he invites Reb Zera back. What happened last year might happen again. That doesn't bother him. He didn't say, I'm not coming back because you killed me last year. And he was not worried about that, about the party, the celebration getting out of hand to the extent that that's why he was afraid to go back. What was his problem? His problem wasn't that Rabbi might kill him. His problem was Rabbi might not be able to revive him.
He was ready to go through that experience again.
Right. He was ready to have that experience again. In other words, if Reb Zera would have known, if he would have been certain in some way that this miracle would happen again, that Rabbi would bring him back to life again, he would have been willing to go back and accept the invitation, even though he could be fully aware that what happened last year might happen again. What was Reb Zera missing in his life that he needed such an adventure? Especially the fact that by doing this, by going to celebrate, if he were willing to go, which clearly he was willing to go back and celebrate Reb Zera, he might bring Reb Zera to a situation where Reb Zera might do what Rabba might do what he did the year before. The Torah says that you shouldn't put an obstacle before a stumbling block before a blind person, which teaches us that you're not allowed to do something that might cause somebody else to sin. So Rabba, how do we find that Reb Zera would be willing? That issue didn't bother him, that he might go and that Rabbi might do what he did the year before, which is clearly a sin. He wasn't afraid to do that. And if it's true that with regard to any prohibition, one is prohibited from putting a stumbling block before somebody else, causing somebody else to slip up. This is certainly so when we're talking about one of the three cardinal sins, one of which is shedding blood. So these are questions in the story. Gam yesh l'daik b'adgoshes haGemara ifsum. Also, we mentioned, I noted before, the Gemara says ifsum. Ifsum is the singular. And Kapirish Rashi, what's ifsum mean? So Rashi says nishtakru, lashon rabim, in the plural. Hainu sherabiv Reb Zera nishtakru shneim. Rashi interprets it that Rabba and Reb Zera both were drunk. So, why is it that Rashi, also the word ivsum is singular? Ivsum would seem to mean he got drunk, but he says they got drunk. So why would Rashi say that they, in the plural, both Rabbi and Reb Zera got drunk? Why is that necessary? So first of all, the Afshar b'Pashtus Yishlei Martam, you can simply say, why does Rashi say they were both drunk? Is because Kibi'im, Reb Zera, lo yoy maskim v'chol zohi, Rabbi Sheichtei, Rei Zachzar Zb'yeiser v'chulu. Imagine Rabbi's drunk and Reb Zera is sober. And Rabbi goes and starts doing what he does to Reb Zera, who's sober. Imagine what that would be like. That's Reb Zera would be resisting, and Rabba would be forcing it. So that makes the crime that much worse. Mikol Makim, nevertheless, Mistaber Leimar, it would seem to say, it seems that this idea that they both were drunk is a necessary part of the story to understand the story. Right? Because besides the fact that it makes the, to say that, like Rashi is going to try and come to the defense of Rabbah by saying that Reb Zera was also drunk. He wasn't fully aware it was happening. Maybe he didn't feel it. Maybe he didn't. That doesn't take away from the horror of the narrative here. So clearly there's got to be more to it. What compels Rashi to say that they were both drunk? Both Rabbah and Reb Zera were drunk. We'll move on. It's obvious that you can't explain, can't explain away this story in the Gemara. That we're talking about two great sages, who were exceedingly great, that were totally not comparable to people like us. And so therefore, since Rabba and Abzeda are two of the greatest sages, they're totally beyond our comprehension. We can't compare to them. So therefore, this whole story is something that's beyond comprehension. We can just dismiss it by that way, saying we're talking about two great sages and their ways and their things are beyond our understanding. Why? Because notwithstanding the fact that true, they are way beyond us. Nevertheless, since the story is actually recorded in Gemara, move on. So therefore, it would have to be. So also this idea that the story needs to be able. We have to be able to understand this. It's okay. The fact that the Gemara tells us it's interesting that the Ein Yaakov doesn't. Some versions of the Ein Yaakov, which is a compendium of all the stories of Gemara written for the people that maybe are not able to understand the complexities of Gemara, but to be able to understand the stories and learn from the Yerushalayim, from the Agadah, from the stories of the Talmud, the ethical qualities, etc. So in some versions of it, it doesn't even have the story. So it doesn't appear because to tell. So part of it, because of this, the Rabba and Abzeda, they were beyond us. Well, we don't understand their lives, we don't understand what was going on with them. It's totally beyond us. And to start reading the story and thinking that something like this played out in that way, people can misunderstand it. It's something that was avoided by many. But the Rebbe says if the story appears in Gemara, then clearly there's a lesson for us, there's a message for us as well. So we have to be able to understand it. Besides the lesson, we have to be able to understand what the story means. Okay. Ubahaktim. So the Rebbe is going to preface it. Al pi Teres Hasoid VaKabbalah in Yanim. It's clear. If you look in Jewish mysticism, you look in Chassidus, and you look in Kabbalah, there are explanations on this. The story is interpreted. There's a mimer from the Rebbe, from the Frierdiker Rebbe, actually Tafshin Ches. We're talking about 70 years ago, another anniversary. A mimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Frierdiker Rebbe addresses this and explains it according to Chassidus. And v'chein b'mamorei ha'amur, also in the teachings of my father, of the Rebbe's father, where he explains it according to Kabbalah. Nevertheless, since everything has to be also be able to understood simply, so this story has to be explainable also simply. There has to be a simple, straightforward explanation to the story, not just a mystical, Kabbalistic one. Furthermore, the Rebbe says that we're compelled to understand the story literally as well. Why? Because this story in the Gemara, how does the story, the context in which the story appears in the Gemara, is in halacha. Because it comes following the statement of Rava that a person is obligated. This is a halacha. Rava is saying a halacha that a person is obligated to become intoxicated on Purim to the point where he doesn't know. So huva sipur edis Rabba v'Rabzeiru shem kaimus achiv l'psumei adalo yada b'poil mamish. This story follows immediately. We quoted in the opening paragraph the Gemara. The Gemara tells us Amar Rava. Immediately afterwards comes the story of Rabba and Abzeiru. Why is the story of Rabba and Abzeiru there? To show us that they act to such an extent. And look, Rabba and Abzeiru did that. So so we have to be able to interpret the story literally, because the story comes not just in the legends of the Talmud section. It's not just in the Agadic teachings of the Talmud, where a lot of these stories are not to be taken literally. This story comes as part of halacha. Either in halacha that's to validate or to corroborate Rava's statement, that Rava says you have to become intoxicated on Purim to the point of Layada, and then the Gemara is bringing proof. What does Ad Layada mean? Look at the story of Rabba and Abzeda. Or, like we're going to find the reverse. The Rabbeinu Ephraim, one of the early Rishonim, says, he brings proof from this story that the halach is not like Rava. He says the halach is not like Rava. Rava says the halach is chayiv inish l'psumei b'puri ad l'yada, that a person has to become intoxicated. And comes Rabbeinu Ephraim and says the halach is not like Rava. How do we know the halach is not like Rava? Because the Gemara brings a story to disprove Rava. That what happens if you follow Rava? This might happen. The story of Rabba and Abzeda might happen. So v'les hilchos hakavasei v'lav shaper dami l'mevad hachi. So Rabbeinu Ephraim looks at the story of Rabba and Abzeda and says this is proof of how not to behave, what not to do. So the point is that Rabbeinu Ephraim learns the story literally. If the story is not literal, if it's just a mystical, Kabbalistic story, then what's the proof that the halacha is not like Rava? We're talking about the spiritual things. So the fact that Rabbeinu Ephraim understands the story that it happened literally, and because he understands it literally, therefore he says it's proof not to do that. That the halacha is not like Rava. And it seems that the Ramban also agrees. So you have the Ran, you have the Moira Katan, you have that quote from Rabbeinu Ephraim, and the Ramban seems to agree as well. This implies that the story is literal. Therefore, we have to explain the story also in its literal understanding. The literal reading of the story of Rabbi Reb Zera needs to be understood because the story is taken literally by many of the by many of the Poskim and the Rishonim and the Achreinim. So some take it literally. The main point here is that we're learning a halacha. The story comes to support or contradict the halacha. So therefore, you can't bring a story to support or contradict halacha, a mystical story. A mystical story you can't learn halacha from it. So the story has to be taken literally in its simple meaning of the story. And like that, it can either support the Rava, that Rava says, and here we see Rabbi Reb Zera did it, and therefore, with that supports the halacha, and that's actually the majority of Poskim, Paskin, and that's the halacha in Shulchan Aruch, is that a person does have to have the halacha is like Rava, that you're obligated to become intoxicated. And then there's a minority of the Poskim who say no, that we don't have it, and what's the proof is this story. So the story is either used as a proof, as a support, or a refutation. Okay. When you talk about something that appears in the Haggadic section of Torah, meaning in the legends of the Talmud, so the mivsami, like the story of the drunkenness that we find by Rabba Bar Chana. In the Gemara in Bava Basra, there's a whole series of stories about Rabba Bar Chana. A bunch of stories. And none of these stories, you look at those stories, the stories can't be taken literally, they can't be literal. In fact, the story of the Mivsami, there's a story also of drunkenness there. That story is Rabba Bar Chana came, he's an Arab merchant, brought him to a place in the desert, and he saw a whole bunch of people laying on the floor. They were intoxicated. They're Mivsami, they were all drunk. And they were laying passed out. They had blacked out in their drunkenness. That's how Rabba Bar Chana saw it. And one of them had his foot up, and he describes that they were so big, these people were so giant, that the merchant was riding on his camel, holding a spear in his hand, and he was able to clear under the leg of this drunken person laying there on the floor. That story is not brought in context of halacha, or it's not trying to teach us any halachic ruling. All those stories, you could take them as meaning something spiritual, something mystical, something ethical. It's not a halacha, so you don't have to take those stories literally. So there you can like the other stories in that discussion in the Gemara that allude to spiritual things. The Zohar quotes some of them and brings some lessons, and plenty of the commentaries do as well. But here in our case, our story here of Rabba and Reb Zera, you can't say that it's two different things. Rav is saying he means literally to drink wine, and then comes the story about Rabba and Reb Zera that it was spiritual wine. It was not wine. Doesn't connect. So we have to say that that the story has to be understood literally. Very interesting. There's some very interesting interpretations of the story, and very interesting interpretations of this halacha. Tosfos, for instance, weighs in. So he says you have to be so drunk that you can't be able to really recite that whole verse, because that Arer Haman Baruch Mordechai is in Shoshanas Yaakov. So it's Arer Haman Baruch Mordechai Zeresh, right? Baruch Esther. So if you read the whole statement, you can get semished. The Magen Avram quotes from other Rishonim that you get so drunk you can't calculate the gematria that Arer Haman and Baruch Mordechai are the same gematria. They have the same numerical value. So a bunch of different ways that they talk about. There's another statement that says, another interpretation that Rebbe doesn't bring here, that Ad Layada is from the Ad Ephraim. He says that the story here, Rabba and Reb Zera, he kind of straddles the fence here. He says the halacha is like Rava, not like the Rabbeinu Ephraim, who says that this story proves that the halacha is not like Rava, but the halacha is taka like it. The problem was that Rabba and Reb Zera didn't fulfill the halacha like Rava. Rava says ad lo yada, until lo yada, ad v'lo yad b'chlal, only till lo yada, only to the verge. And Rabba and Reb Zera went past it. They went into lo yada. They went past it. So anyway, we okay with time, or we keep going? Okay. So let's quote now. Is Gimel here. have a couple of minutes. That Marsha interprets the story as follows. So we have a big question here on the table, is how is that Rabba, especially we know Rabba's greatness, we know everybody who learns Tanya, learn Perek Aleph of Tanya, you know that Rabba was so great that the Gemara says that Rabba was so, he didn't stop learning, even when it came time for the angel of death to take him, he couldn't approach him. So we know Rabba was so great. So how could it be that there should be such an episode on his record, such an experience, that he would get so drunk that he would do something like this? So the Chedushei Haggadah, the Marsha explains that Rabba there was no murder here. There wasn't a death. Elo ke'ein shachta. It was like he shechted. It was like he slaughtered him. What does that mean? The agber chamre, the kafi lishlis yosem medai, at shechalav and atalamas. That Rabba was overcome by his drinking. And you know what happens when you get overcome by your drinking, you start to encourage other people to drink. And so Rabba, who was able maybe to drink a little bit more, he was sort of pushing Reb Zera to drink more than Reb Zera was able to handle. And therefore Reb Zera he drank too much and he got like alcohol poisoning. He got sick from the alcohol, and therefore he got violently ill. He got very ill. He was almost going to die. So he didn't kill him. He didn't die, but he got so sick from the alcohol that Rabba was trying, kind of forcing down his throat, that he almost died. Okay, ein zetiritz gam harayvitz. The Yavit says, "Shaloi shachtim mamish, ela ba'achizes einayim, v'rak haroim hayu svurim sheshachtim be'emes." After B'Zera nispal mehem lavash charadav v'nisaf merev dages. So the Yavit says, Yaakov says, he explains the story like this: that it wasn't that he didn't kill him; it just looked like it. Rabba somehow in the celebration did something with Reb Zera. Maybe he grabbed him. He did something in a way that it looked like he was shechting him. It looked like he was slaughtering him, and everybody saw it. And they understand the story somewhat literally, but not entirely. The Rebbe says if there's room to be able to explain the story literally, to understand the story, that there was actually a taking of his life. And still, this should somehow still all be resolved, and we can understand why Rabba should be able to come to such a thing and make sense of the whole story. So then there's room for such an explanation as well. But Ubefrat, shegam edivri Rabbeinu Ephraim, shenitcha v'nisbat lachil l'bsum b'priyad lo yada mipnei uvded Rab Zera mashma, shahayez adavar Kam Rabba Yisrael misa mamish, shlachan hayahechrich levat l'sachiv de l'bsumei. Especially if you consider what we quoted from Rabbeinu Ephraim, who says that this story of Rabba and Reb Zera is proof that the halach is not like Rava. So why would Rabbeinu Ephraim come to that conclusion to say the halach literal understanding? So then the Gemara would have to tell us that such a story that because somebody got sick and something dangerous was happening. So therefore we're telling you that we're doing away with that. We'll stop now. We'll continue.